Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? And I do see Winrich is in the comments, and I hope you're ready to go back to storage soon, hopefully. But I'm going to ask you, I don't know if you can do Sundays instead. That'll be a channel we'll have to, a discussion we're going to have to take offline. Everyone always wonders who I'm talking to. That's not actually in the show. It's always people in chat. So today, try not to do so much chit chat in the beginning. How are y'all doing? We're gonna do the YouTuber stuff in a minute, but today let me do the setup. Today we are dealing with Michael Knowles. The Daily Wire just has become a bastion of the woke right, but I think the most blatant example of it, and I'm not the only one to think this, is Michael Knowles. Now, the show I'm responding to is before Trump was elected. So you will note that some of his comments are obviously quite dated. They're more than a month old. But the principles behind them and the attitude behind them are still quite relevant. And in fact, the attitude has only gotten worse since his quote-unquote side won. So I've got about 9 or so clips we're going to deal with, and even though some of it is dated, we are still going to deal with it. There's going to be a cult of R tonight, God willing. After Mike and I do some parliamentary training, we'll be discussing that because it's Parla Prep tonight. Oh, and thank you for the super chat, Winrich, and let me let you guys know what that's going to go to. What a perfect segue. So thank you so much. I want to put that on the screen too. Winrich says, woke right is a term I didn't think I'd hear. You're going to be hearing that a lot from me. There's quite a few YouTubers using it, but it is so true. It is so true. But I do appreciate the super chat because I've been complaining to you guys. You may have noticed that the camera quality is not as good as it normally is, and it's not my phone. My phone's right here. My phone has the worst. I think I got to take it in to be repaired. I think something happened to the lenses. So I'm using, it was a very good quality webcam at the time. And it still has a decent picture, but I've been doing this long enough that I either need to invest in a mirrorless DSLR that just stays in my studio or a real high-end webcam. So all super chats go into that fund to improve the video quality. So it's going to get invested white, like I said, like a wascally wabbit, right back into the show. And I just did an episode of Jurassic Dictionary right before now and did it in one take, bada bing. Usually I have like 50 jump cuts. So we're going to get into the woke rightness of Michael Knowles and why, no matter what. Let me make a point here first that I made on Twitter, and I'm not going to make it, not that you're ever eloquent on Twitter, but usually the first time you type it out is better. But I had basically said that there's a lot of libertarians that are getting confused between an alleged libertarian outcome and libertarianism. And there's a difference. Like, there are things, pretend I'm an atheist, which I'm not, I'm a Christian, but just pretend I'm an atheist. There are things I could do that some people would consider a Christian outcome, because I don't think only Christians could be good people. So I could just be the type of atheist that goes out every weekend and feeds the homeless and just does all kinds of great charitable works, which people would think is a Christian outcome if they were looking at it from a Christian point of view. But my motivations would be different. It wouldn't be to like glorify Jesus. I wouldn't have believed in Jesus. And it doesn't mean you have to dislike the outcomes, but you have to understand it's not coming from a Christian foundation. So other things I do will not be consistent with a Christian worldview. And it's the same thing with some things that are happening in the Trump administration. It's not all bad. It's certainly not all good. And there are some outcomes which are very consistent with what a libertarian would do. But you have to understand it's not because of a libertarian impulse. The reason that they're getting done is not from a libertarian grounding principle. Therefore, you can't rely upon it, and it can turn on a dime. So, for instance, you have someone who pardoned Ross Ulbricht, but in the same person, they're declared Mexican quote-unquote drug cartels, which are only caused by the drug war. Well, not only, but primarily caused by the drug war, to be put in a terrorist watch list without realizing things like that can easily put people who are of a more anti-government bent on a terrorist watch list. Be careful what you wish for. So it's not coming from a libertarian place. It was coming from political expediency or the fact, he served enough time, even though that generally would be a commutation. But while we can cheer and be grateful for the pardon of Ross Ulbricht, still admit it didn't come from a libertarian place. So it might have been a libertarian outcome, but it wasn't a libertarian policy. And I gave the example of Twitter, where this was a while ago after gay marriage was legalized, and it was somewhere in the South, and I'm not trying to rag on the South, but maybe it was Tennessee or Alabama, I think, where there were some Republican legislators who wanted to abolish government licensing of marriage. Definitely a libertarian outcome. Should we support that? Yes, of course. But do we claim that those government electeds are libertarians? No, because their motivation was, if marriage can't be restricted just to what we think is a biblical form of marriage or whatever our conservative worldview is, we want to take it away from everybody. So that impulse was not a libertarian impulse. It was actually a bigoted impulse, in my point of view. But that doesn't mean we can't support the outcome. But don't confuse it with those people being libertarians. Yes, I would like to see Ian Freeman freed too, Roger Ver. There's all kinds of persons. And the fact is, Joe Biden also released nonviolent drug offenders who just had the misfortune of not being as famous as Ross Ulbricht. And I don't begrudge Ross that. His mother was a tireless warrior for him, and he did not deserve what he got. But let's not confuse. So, audit the Fed. Yes, audit the Fed. Just understand it doesn't come from a libertarian place. It doesn't make Trump a libertarian. It doesn't make his administration libertarian. It just means it's gotten so bad that the normies even see it. All right, because now we're going to deal with some of the influencers in this new right-wing sweep, which is Michael Knowles. He's somewhat of an influencer. And I think he would come from the wing that went after, though I'm not saying he did this, but I think he would be sympathetic to the wing of the MAGA movement that went after Scott Pressler on Twitter and said, these openly unashamed gay men should be booted out of MAGA, okay? And we're fools if we don't pretend like that exists. Now, of course, there was a lot of pushback, but the fact that even happened is a problem. Okay, without further ado, I don't even remember what Knowles said here. Again, this is an older clip, so you're getting my contemporaneous responses, and I need to be able to hit mute so I don't have an echo since I don't have headphones on, and here we go.
Conservatives are warming up to some regulation. When I was a kid, Republicans hated regulation. They wanted to deregulate everything. If they could shrink the government down into nothing, that would be better. Some Republicans spoke as though they were anarchists, for goodness sakes.
For goodness sakes. Oh, no. Well, that should let you know right there, we're not coming from a libertarian place. Though I'm not claiming that all libertarians need to be anarchists. Certainly some libertarians are. And if we are functioning in a healthy manner, the minarchists and the anarchists will get along. You know how I feel about that. I'm an anarchist, but I do not go after minarchists. I think it's a completely stupid battle. But just notice he said quite proudly the truth. Republicans are not anti-regulation. They're not anti-regulation any more than the Democrats are. They are just for different regulations. And Michael Knowles is celebrating because at least now they're not pretending that they are against regulation. And I guess I would celebrate that too. I am glad when the mask is off and the pretense is off. Because Republicans are not small government. So, let's go to the next clip.
The Democrats were the party of regulation in the popular consciousness. But of course, neither party is really totally for regulation or totally against regulation. Democrats are pro-regulation when it comes to killing businesses. They're pro-regulation when it comes to taking your money. They're pro-regulation when it comes to taking children away from their parents and exposing children to radical gender ideology. They're very much in favor of regulation there. They're against regulation when it comes to, well, allowing people to do really weird, freaky stuff. They're against regulation when it comes to drugs. They're against regulation when it comes to sex. They're against regulation, personal sexual behaviors. They're against regulation when it comes to all sorts of derelict things.
And the implication being there that he is proud that the Republicans, we're going to pick one of the examples, want to regulate personal sexual relationships by their definition of degenerate. Now, I'm in the happy position here of disagreeing with both sides. But the fact is, if we're not going to straw man people we disagree with, the people on the other side, on the left that he's criticizing, truly think they're doing what's right. Now, I don't agree with their regulations either. But Knowles makes it as if they're the obvious saints. They're the obvious angels. And the left is the obvious devils. Well, I think they're both devils. And that's the libertarian point of view. He is just so thrilled with the idea of getting to regulate other people's sexual lives because they're degenerate. And of course, they got into the drug issue. Now, I'm the unusual I'm not going to say unusual libertarian because I think a lot of libertarians feel the way I do, but just don't want to say it. I'm too busy. I'm not a substance user. I'm not saying most libertarians. I think most libertarians are this way. I told the story before when I went to Vegas with Lily Tang Williams and she ordered a glass of milk at the casino. I think I'm going to be scarred for life over that. Love you, Lily. But I'm not a substance user. But I'm going to say something that I think a lot of libertarians are scared to say, even though I think secretly a lot of them agree with me. I actually don't have a huge moral problem with people who responsibly use. I don't have a moral problem with hard drugs. There is a book out there actually called the Adult's Guide to Drug Use or something like that, where some guy who just talks about how he's been a recreational heroin user for like ever. I'm going to be right up front with you. I've never even tried the stuff, have no desire to, but I've known functional drug users and I've known addicts. My brother was an addict. My brother was a terrible addict. He was homeless for years. But my mother was also an alcoholic, so I think it was a genetic component because I've known functional drug users, and I'm not going to name them, and the people that I've named are deceased. So I'm not impugning anyone's living reputation. My brother, unfortunately, died, I think it's been six years now. My mother's been gone since I was 29 years old. But I think it's entirely possible to decide one weekend you're going to, responsible in moderation. Most libertarians will go, yes, drugs should be legal, but drugs are bad, okay? I think it depends. I think it's a much more nuanced view. But notice how excited he is about controlling that, about throwing people into cages for that. That is not a libertarian view. And if you think this is unusual in the Republican Party, you need to wake up. Now, if you are a libertarian who thinks it's fine to, make this kind of Faustian bargain in exchange, it's fine. Go ahead and do that. But it's not libertarian. And if you think that's moving the needle, go and join the Republicans and do that. And I wish you the best of luck in getting us whatever freedoms you think you can. But the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian platform is for consistent libertarianism. That not only wants to see audit the Fed, that not only wants to see Ross Ulbricht free, but also wants to see the full legalization of drugs and for the government to keep out of our bedrooms. That shouldn't be controversial. And it's just so distressing that it actually is. And I'm going to say something that's going to trigger a lot of people here, and it can. I'm perfectly in line with the LP platform. The free movement of people across political boundaries is a libertarian position.
The same goes for Republicans. We like some regulations. We don't like other regulations. The question is not the procedural norm of do you regulate or not. Now we recognize that the real debate is just over what kind of regulations are we going to have. We're going to have a government. We're going to pass laws. We're going to do good and avoid evil, I hope. So what's good? What are we going to do? What's bad?
See, he wants to legislate his morality. And yes, I realize that is somewhat of a shallow phrase, that all laws up to a point legislate morality. But the only kind of justified laws, if any, that we think in a libertarian construct are ones that impinge upon the positive rights of others. And yes, that is a moral position. But he wants to go into voluntary, or what should be voluntary, morality. I'm sure Michael Knowles would be thrilled if homosexuality was outlawed again. He's much more extreme than Ben Shapiro, who I don't think believes there should be laws against it, whereas he don't believe that homosexual marriage should be recognized by the state. Now, I'm going to parse out the libertarian position here. Obviously, I don't think any marriages should be recognized by the state. I don't think it's the business of the state at all. But I don't mind telling you, and some people will be mad at me for this, there's a line. Go read the Libertarian Party platform, because there's actually quite a very nuanced line in there. Some people agree with it. It said, for as long as the state illegitimately recognizes marriage. Sorry, I got texts going off. Let's let that go for a second there. Or let me turn the volume down. What a dummy I am. It says, for as long as the state illegitimately issues licenses for marriage, they have to issue licenses to everybody without distinction. You want to know who wrote that part? Now, obviously, one person can't pass it, but I wrote it. I wrote it when I was the platform committee chair in 2018. Obviously, the delegates passed it, but I was the author of that. As Mike Seebeck will tell you, he was the author of the licensing plank. Obviously, the delegates had to pass it, but Mike was the author of it. We also have that in the Colorado platform. So I know some libertarians disagree and think we shouldn't take any position on that, but the party platform does. So what's the implications of that? The implications of it is, if the government is going to be involved in marriage, then they have to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. But it goes further than that. It's not just couples. Our plank actually says to all takers. So if you want to have a throuple, the libertarian position is, if the state's going to issue licenses, they can't discriminate based upon the fact that you want to be married to more than one person. Radical libertarianism. That's what the LP is here for. Now, some people think compromise is the way we're going to get to liberty, and I disagree with them, but I respect that that's their opinion. There are two parties that already exist that are well suited to do that. It is not the Libertarian Party. That is not our role. And Skeeto said, I'm going to stick up here because he says, group marriage, fine with me. I've used the example, let's have Heinleinian line marriages from the moon is a harsh mistress. And I say this as someone who has a pretty traditional marriage. Like, I'm not a trad wife or anything like that, but I do have a traditional marriage with fairly traditional marriage roles. The husband is the head of my household. I have no shame in saying that, but I don't think everyone should be forced to live that way. Okay, next one.
I don't necessarily need to conclude that the enemy of my enemy is my friend to recognize that TikTok is a good counterbalance to Facebook and YouTube. And maybe Republicans shouldn't be so fast to celebrate its shutting down. My ideal world is Facebook and Google and YouTube get in line, and then we can turn off the Chinese app and we can just have good, normal public square in America. If Facebook and YouTube are not willing to play ball, throw a little TikTok in there, make them play ball.
Okay, now this was when TikTok was going to be banned, which obviously it wasn't. But notice he wasn't against banning TikTok in principle. He was against it as a way to pressure other companies to do what he thinks is best. Now, on the censorship of Facebook, Google, for YouTube and pre-Elon Twitter, I probably would agree with him, but it's not the same grounding. I don't believe in banning TikTok, and I don't believe in using TikTok as a leverage. Now, he went and made the point, and it might be in an upcoming clip, or I might not have clipped it out, that he became super suspicious by seeing who was also really in favor of the TikTok ban. And it was Facebook and YouTube, because it was a way to get rid of competition. And that is, in fact, with a great deal of regulation, as the industries that are being regulated normally want the regulation so that they can have market capture and keep competition out. Next clip.
Speaking of digital media, Sam Alito, the great Supreme Court Justice, has asked a wonderful question about pornography. People are making fun of him for it, but it's actually a really, really good question that gets to an issue far beyond pornography, actually gets to questions of free speech in the public square. Sam Alito asked if .com has essays in it by Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley Jr. So he said, this is while they are considering Okay,
I want to stop here because I got confused even listening to this. He won't say Pornhub. So when you hear like this blank error, dead air.com, he's saying Pornhub.com. This is what we've gotten to. It reminds me of my fundamentalist Christian days, where I'd go, darn you to heck. And he's talking about Pornhub. And is that the public square? You kind of have to go there. It's not like on display in front of the courthouse. And also, you can tell that I've watched too many like true crime videos, because YouTube does not let you say a certain type of crime. You have to abbreviate it as SA. And I think the A stands for assault. You can fill in the blank as to what S stands for. So in these true crime episodes, just like they can't say, well, I'm going to say it here, I never get monetized. Well, I do barely. My support comes from patrons and super chats. So all super chats matter. Help me get a better camera. But like you're in YouTube, you're not really supposed to say eating disorder. You have to say ED, which actually like means something else too. But in anyway, so when I first heard this, I was like, SA? Is he talking about, assaulting people? No, he's just saying it weird. He's saying SA. ESSAY, like a long form writing. That's what he's talking about. So he is saying that Justice Alito asked if there are essays in Pornhub content. Okay, so now that we've got that clear, so that you're not confused if I was confused.
HB 1181. This is a Texas law requiring sites to verify the age of users. Very simple stuff. Repeatedly has demonstrated that it would rather totally cease to do business in a state rather than comply with a simple law that says you got to make sure that kids aren't looking at your product.
Whose job is it to make sure kids are not accessing inappropriate sites? It is the parents' job. It's not the company's job, and it is not the government's job. And I actually have a whole show on why Pornhub does not want to make you submit your ID. You're talking about a use that can be easily used for blackmail or other means to retaliate against people. Anonymity is important in pursuing such interests, prurient or not. He makes it sound as they're just eager for children to watch their product. And I don't believe they are, but even if they were, it's the parents' job. And this is, in fact, the slippery slope argument. Like, people like to make fun of libertarians, such as Daryl Perry, who was getting upset at the 2016 convention over driver's licenses. And I once knew someone in Florida who used to be the chair of Florida. I still know him, as a matter of fact. Used to be the chair of Florida, who got arrested because he refused to get a driver's license. And people are like, oh, it's just a little thing. Well, what do you think things like driver's licenses are used to justify? Even greater things, like walking around with a vaccine ID card. Well, we already make you have a driver's license. See, once you, Millay had it right, and I don't want to call it the shit libs or the leftists, because I think it's just status, and I don't believe in it's just the leftists, because as we're seeing right here, it's not. It's the shit status. You don't give them an inch. If we didn't have driver's licenses, insurance companies would require basic competency. Here's the thing. I'm a paralegal, as a lot of you know. I've been doing it for 35 years. What do you think is one of the qualifications that gets me hired? Besides, now, obviously I have a lot of experience. I have a voluntary certification. I don't have a license from the state. The paralegal industry, except in some states, which I think is a mistake, does not have licensure. There is two major organizations. Now, one of them I don't know if exists anymore, but I know the one I am registered with is the major one. And it's back when paralegals were called legal assistants. Now, legal assistants are actually secretaries, but, terminology changes. But it's the National Association of Legal Assistants, NALA. I've been certified with them for my entire career. And that's what employers look for. And a lot of you also know I'm a registered parliamentarian. That's not a state-issued license. It's a voluntary certification with the National Association of Parliamentarians. I have to have continuing education credits. There is checks and balances in there in a private setting. So if we didn't have driver's license, it isn't as if there would not be safety on the road. In fact, there probably would be more, but you don't give the status an inch. So he goes and it's like, it's perfectly acceptable to say that you have to give an ID in order to log onto a website. And logging onto a website, parents need to have greater supervision over their children's their children's lives. I think yes, a kid's going to lie if his parents aren't supervising him and says, are you over 18? They're going to say yes. But I really do think that that's all an online company needs to do. Now, if this was a brick and mortar purveyor of adult materials and someone walks in and they obviously look like they're 12, then I do think there's a responsibility on the shop owner, or however you'd like to put it, and on the parents. That could entail legal obligations. But online's an entirely different world, and parents need to learn to exercise greater supervision over their children. So anyway, sorry, got off on a bit of a tangent there. I did do a whole show on this idea, and it was responding to Matt Walsh, of requiring some kind of identification in order to access adult content. Okay, next clip.
So the Free Speech Coalition, which is a association, they call it Free Speech Coalition, but it's just pro obscenity, it's pro licentiousness. They're trying to block this law. And
okay, let's stop here a second. He wouldn't say that. Okay, a true free speech coalition, I don't know anything about this group that he's talking about, but I'm going to harken back to the old civil liberties, what is it? The ACLU, the old ACLU, not the new woke ACLU, the old ACLU that actually defended Nazis and the Westboro Baptist Church. Both groups I despise, but it is free speech. Now, there are plenty of people who think the things that Michael Knowles say shouldn't be free speech, that it's hate speech, that it incites bad feelings against people. And a true free speech coalition would defend Knowles as much as they would defend Rachel Maddow or whatever like leftist figure you can think of. So it's funny the way he's just disparaging this as, oh, they just want to defend degeneracy. But how would he feel if some leftist said, if that same group was defending the rights of right-wing commentators to say, oh, they just want to defend fascism? He wouldn't care for it. It's only the libertarian position that is consistent. And I say that without apology.
Alito says one of the parties here is the owner of. Is it like the old Playboy magazine? You have essays there by the modern day equivalent of Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley Jr. Everyone's making fun of him, saying, you old boomer, you don't know what is. You know, I think he does. I think Sam Alito, one of the most intelligent men in the country, one of the greatest jurists in the country, I think he knows.
Get a room already, Knowles.
The answer to his question. And I think most good lawyers know you never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. What he's pointing out is the kind of free speech arguments that were made in defense of Playboy half a century ago do not hold for these digital media companies. In this case, the biggest company in the world. Back in the day, people could say, oh, I read Playboy for the articles. And they were probably being disingenuous, but
Wait, let's stop here. I'm going to admit, I always admit where I'm ignorant of something. Was that the crux of the arguments back then, that it was for the articles? Maybe it was. I don't know. I haven't read historic cases for such things. But wasn't there a big case like what, Hustler? And Hustler wasn't known for its highbrow articles. But anyway, yeah, saying, I actually, listen, there's no shame in my game. I've got a bunch of Playboys upstairs that I've read on this show. There are some good articles in Playboy, but Mama ain't gonna lie. I've looked at the centerfolds.
Pro faction pointed to the essays, pointed to the articles, and said, no, see, this has redeeming artistic merit. And so you can't call it obscenity and you can't ban it. Do you know anyone who watches for the articles?
Sorry, I had my mute button on. Don't think Pornhub has articles. Don't know anybody who claims that. So that was kind of funny. And one thing I've always said about Knowles, okay, I disagree with him. I think he's a theocrat. But that freeze frame right there is just so photogenic. I think he's adorable. And that's actually what's dangerous about him is he has this boyish charm when he is saying some of the most anti-freedom things. But that's a cute photo. You got to admit, that's a cute freeze frame right there. Okay, continuing. And this is the last clip.
What is the significance of essays? Well, it gets to the Miller test. The Miller test is the court's test to figure out what is obscene. Obscene content is not protected by the First Amendment. There's no right to go strip naked and perform a lewd act in the middle of the street. That's not free speech.
And Pornhub isn't anyone stripping naked and standing in the middle of the street performing a lewd act. Now, on that count, there shouldn't be quote unquote public property in that sense. We could get into rights of ingress and egress, which is a whole rabbit trail that I take, that I depart from some libertarian orthodoxy on. But to compare the two is a huge equivocation. That is not what Pornhub does whatsoever. So if he's correctly representing the Miller test, which I'm not familiar with, I'm going to admit that right off, that doesn't apply. And I don't really think the court has any business in determining quote unquote obscenity. Yes, there does become a difficulty when we do in fact have quote unquote public property. And there are interim measures, but the interim measures should be working towards privatization. But that is irrelevant here. We don't have to deal with that. Ski 2 is correct. It is a false analogy. This is a website you have to purposely go to. It doesn't just automatically, well, I'll be damned. It just popped up on my screen. Honey, I wasn't looking at that.
To lust. It's got to depict in a patently offensive way sexual content, and it has to lack serious artistic, political, or scientific value. Beautiful question from Alito. I think it should be absolutely deadly to case here. No one's watching for the articles. So they can either institute reasonable age verification measures to make sure that little kids aren't using their product, or it seems they really don't want to do that. They're just terrified of having to do that to make sure that kids aren't looking at their product. So then they're going to have to stop doing business in places like Texas. Okay, works for me.
Did you notice the bait and switch? I didn't when I first clipped that out. So at first he's talking about the Miller test, the alleged Miller test, and I'm going to take his word for it that it is what it said it is. That's an argument for an outright ban. That's not an argument for just trying to keep children from watching it. Because is he saying that it's okay for children to watch it as long as the nudity and the sex acts are delivering a political or artistic message too? I don't think he would be saying that. Is he making the argument that children should have access to Playboy because it did have some cerebral articles in it? No. This is the bait and switch both he and Matt do. They prostitute out the children, the think of the children, in order to ban activities for adults. It is the Trojan horse that libertarians are buying into unawares. This should be a call to more radicalism and not appeasement of the right. Because this is just a different flavor of authoritarianism. All right, everyone, that is going to be it for this evening. It's been a jam-packed day for me. I'm going off to a parliamentary class. I think it will be, I'm trying to think of what time, 6, 7:30 or 8. There will be Cult of RONR on tonight, so it's a lot of recording today. I didn't do the YouTube thing. Let me stick this up here. Nope, that's the wrong thing. It's this one. Nope, that's not it either. Hold on. This is it. Subscribe and follow on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. But most of all, I'd really appreciate if you become a patron on patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. Or again, super chats always matter. My patrons do get advanced viewings of the Pink Parliamentarian episodes, as well as Jurassic Dictionary, and exclusive viewing to the book discussions that I have. And we're right now going through The Morality of Capitalism. Almost done with it. Haven't decided what we're going to do next. I hope you all have an awesome night. And for those of you who will be back later for the Cult of R&R, I'll see you then. Mi guapa, stay libertad. Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to